Yes, hello once again. Welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV. And if you're a brand new viewer or even subscriber to my channel, then welcome aboard. And I do hope you find something to interest you in here with regards looking at these old classic and twin shock race bikes. So right now we're going to take a look at a machine that's still regarded as one of the best open class twin shock racers of the 1980s, and this particular bike isn't a fully original machine from that year, but nonetheless it's still worth a look here on CDB TV. Now this video is slightly longer than my usual postings, but we do have some racing footage of the bike for you to take a look at the end of the video. So I do hope you enjoy taking a look at Jim Colligan's 1981 490 Mega 2 Maico. Now, very few motocross bikes have had the impact in the sport that these 81 490 Maicos have had, and in the last 40 years or so, it's pretty fair to say that many of the other great motocross bikes of their time have come and gone, and some have even been excellent race machines, but very few have had the impact and the longevity of the mighty 81 490 Maico Mega 2, which is still regarded even in this modern day as possibly the best open class twin shock race bike ever made. Now, throughout those golden years of the 1970s, it's quite fair to say that Maico did build some fantastic twin shock race bikes, right from these golden days of the AW Adolf Wheel coffin-shaped alloy tankers to what was basically a very good model in 1979 with these lovely Magnums. But of course, 1980 wasn't the best year for Maico, and that year's model certainly wasn't their best chassis design either, and a bike to which I can personally relate because I did ride this featured bike back in the day, and although this 1980 machine was good enough for my limited talents, it certainly wasn't the greatest handling twin shock racer. But nevertheless, the 1980 bike did have a fantastic 440 piston port engine. Although when it came to 1981, Maico without doubt got their sums and their calculations and their chassis design absolutely spot on when they launched this awesome 490 Mega 2 that took the motocross world by storm in that year, and since its unveiling in 1981, it's still as popular today as it was back in the 1980s. But our featured 81 Mega 2 belongs to Scottish rider Jim Colligan, who it's pretty fair to say is a bit of a 490 fanatic when it comes to these old German two-wheelers, and despite Jim trying other makes and models of twin shock motocrossers down the years, for some strange reason he always returns to his beloved Maicos, mainly because he says these 490s have what no other twin shock motocross racers provide, and that's superb handling and a motor that can propel you like a ballistic missile around a racetrack. But as you've already worked out, our featured example here isn't a fully stock original 490 because, to be fair, these Mega 2s are now coming up to more than 41 years old now, so you're never going to find an original untouched example, and if you did, it'll probably be in some kind of motorcycle museum somewhere. But that said, our bike here still has its original chassis, motor, fuel tank, forks and a few other factory fixtures, but there are so many replacement and upgraded parts that you can source for these 490s nowadays, and that's another reason that they make a good bike for riders who love their big open class twin shock motocrossers. And so, beginning with our Mega 2's steel chassis, which, as I said, was such a great design for 1981, and since then motocross bike manufacturers across the globe have tried to emulate and copy all the parameters of this iconic chassis. And even in this modern day, there are many small companies now like these BZS racing frames who are now making carbon copies of the 81 Maico chassis. And of course, these are all supplied in kit form, which include the rear swing arm, the axle, and swing arm bearings, and of course bearings for that steering head. And even modern day riders who want to build their own hybrid twin shocker and maybe use other power plants like the 480 Honda two-stroke engine to power them, all want to base their frame measurements on this iconic Mega 2 design because of its reputation for superior handling. But again, the frame's fantastic design was just one of the incredible success stories of this great twin shock motocrosser. But this fantastic 492 stroke engine is the other part of the 81 Mega 2's success story. And if you're a rider who likes your open class twin shock motors big and brutal, then look no further. This piston port engine is certainly not for the faint-hearted, because snap the throttle open on this bad boy and you'd be off like the proverbial ballistic missile. But as I remember from my past Maico racing days, these 490 engines as standard, I think they had a bore of around 86 millimetres and a stroke of about 83 millimetres. And on a good day, these engines could push out about 47 horsepower. Okay, it was a bit short of the power of that 81495 KTM, which was said to be over the 50 plus mark. But what these 490s lacked in ponies, they certainly made up for in torque, which was again said to be around 44.5 foot-pounds of muscle. Now, inside these sandcast alloy casings, we had a 5-speed gearbox and a clutch that used beveled washers that acted as clutch springs, which did look like they were a bit of a Maico afterthought, but surprisingly, these still worked quite well. Although one of the Achilles heels of our Maico motor was using a primary chain to connect the crankshaft and the transmission together, and if this wasn't kept in check and inspected regularly, these did have a bit of a tendency to stretch and rattle, or in worst case scenarios sometimes even break and cause engine or casing damage. And as good as the powerful Maico engines were, they weren't perfect by any means. But to fuel that big thirsty Maico motor, a quite large 40mm Bing carburetor would have been used to feed the engine with premix gas. And personally, I've always found that a bit of time taken to set up these old Bing carburetors and get them jetted just right made them every bit as good as a modern day Japanese Mikuni. And as I said, as you can see, our motor is a piston port model, although later versions did have the improved reed valve on the carbs intake, which made the engine fuel better and almost eliminated that bogging down in the slow corners scenario that was normally associated with its piston port predecessor. And also the bike's air filter airbox was of a plastic construction, and the foam air filter inside was accessed by removing the 2 bolts at the rear of the seat and then undoing the securing clip, whereby it could then be cleaned and replaced. Now, once again, the sparks for the engine were supplied by an electronic multiplat system, and the ignitions cover in 1981 would have been just a simple black plastic item, although Jim's replaced it now with this very nice CNC machined billet alloy part from Bill Brown at Wolfsport. Now, once again, you can see that the footrests on Jim's 490 aren't the 81 originals, as those were quite skinny items, as I remember from that period, and these did have a tendency to bend quite easily, as they weren't made of very high quality material. But these alloy wide replacements are certainly a much better option, and these will be, of course, lighter and offer the rider much more support for his feet when he's standing up on the pegs. And that alloy rear brake lever is another upgraded part, which is an improvement over that soft steel Maico original. But over the years, Maico did fit some decent suspension systems to the race bikes, considering the technology of that time, and these 42mm stanchions fitted to our 81 were considered quite substantial for their day, although they certainly weren't the best, as riders often commented that these were badly undersprung and over-damped. But they did give the rider about 12 inches of travel to play with, and scope for tuning or adjustment was really limited to adding or removing air through a pair of Schrader valves on the top of each fork leg. And further improvements could be gained by experimenting with different spring rates or using different weights of fork oils. But despite their minor drawbacks, you have to remember that these were the European suspension systems of their day, but certainly the Japanese bikes of that same year were streets ahead with their designs. But once more, old school drum brakes for the 81 Mega 2, and these drum brakes, to be fair, were just a centre point to tie in the wheel spokes, because other than that, these drums were pretty useless at slowing or stopping the bike, and it always amazed me how some of the riders actually made them come to a stop. But Jim's Maico here has been fitted with a replacement alloy brake backplate, again all supplied by Bill Brown at Wolfsport. But as you can see, Jim's 490 certainly isn't a show bike, because it still has the battle scars from its previous encounters on the racetrack, all stamped very nicely on this replacement DEP expansion chamber. Now, the tailpipe once again is an alloy replacement for what would have been a mild steel part on the original 81, and as far as I'm aware, this is another replacement item from the guys at DEP. Now, also in 1981, the big Mega 2 would have had a sturdy tubular steel swing arm bolted onto the rear of this chassis, which was extremely strong and certainly did its job without any fuss, although riders did have a tendency to swap these steel parts for these much nicer looking alloy parts, which were more aesthetically pleasing to look at and naturally much lighter. But it's well documented that although these parts were lighter, They just couldn't take the punishment that the original steel swing arms could, and usually it wasn't too long before riders were scrapping these soft alloy parts to replace them once again with the tougher steel items. But if you were one of these people that just happened to have bought a brand new 81 Mega 2 in that year direct from the dealership, then the chances are that it would have come fitted with a pair of Italian Corti Cosso shocks bolted on to the back of your 490, which, to be fair, were pretty useless as motorcycle suspension systems go, and it was quite a common saying back in that time that the Corti Cosso shocks were really just fitted to the back of the bike to hold the rear end of it up while it was sitting in the dealership waiting on a buyer. But thankfully Jim's gone for the much better option here on his bike and bolted on a pair of these top of the range Swedish Olin piggyback shocks, which as you know are possibly the gold standard of motorbike suspension systems, although as they say in TV terms, other suspension systems are also available for these motorcycles. But once more, a plastic fuel tank on the 81490, as it was around 1980 when Maico then switched from the alloy fuel tanks to these plastic varieties. But the good news was that there were no more hours in the workshop pushing out dings and dents on your old alloy fuel tank, which of course gave you much more time to try and get your Maico decals to stick to these plastic tanks, which was a bit of a pain, not only on these Maico fuel cells but many of the other off-roaders that were fitted with plastic gas tanks. But these Maico tanks did certainly store enough fuel to feed that very thirsty 490 piston port motor. More personalised customization on Jim's bike here, with this nice Scottish Saltire flag on the bike's seat cover. And again, I'm pretty sure that this is another item from the guys at MXM Graphics. But as I said, there are so many upgrades and custom parts that you can now buy for your old Mega 2s nowadays, so it's quite easy to put your own personal stamp on your classic twin-shock racer. But again, plastic parts like these 81 side panels are quite easily obtainable now if you want to freshen up your tired old Maico racer. And although stock original 81 Maico plastic front and rear mudguards are now not available, these UFO substitutes are equally as good as the originals, and some might even say better. But it all helps towards keeping these 490s out there on the racetracks. And so finally, as we get a look at the 490s pilot seat, we have a pair of modern style rental handlebars and that Maico crossbar pad there as well. And on the right, a nice decent Gunnar Gasser throttle to control those mad mental horses inside that 490 motor. And both the clutch and front brake levers are a pair of alloy Magura items. Now on the left we have the essential decompressor lever, just to try and help lower the motor's compression, just to get it into its prime spot for starting, which also reminds me of the very first time that I kicked over my 1980 440 with a pair of sneakers on, whereby the bike then kicked back and left me as a cripple for about 3 weeks. So take heed, never ever try and start one of these bikes using anything other than bona fide motocross boots. And so there you have it, a quick look around Jim Colligan's 1981 490 Mega 2. Not an original bike, of course, but who cares? This is still a superb example of one of these great twin shock racers of the early 1980s. A bike that certainly wasn't perfect by any means, because it did have its flaws just the same as any other motocross race bike, but nonetheless it did have a great chassis with a wickedly quick two-stroke motor. And while it may not have had the title of the most perfect motorcycle ever built, there's certainly no disputing the fact that it's still one of the most talked about motocross dirt bikes for its time. So I hope you enjoyed that look around Jim's Maico and its startup. And it just so happens we have some nice archive footage for you here of Jim's bike in action on the racetrack. And this in particular footage was taken at Windy Hill, Kincardine in 2010. And as you can see, an absolutely soaking wet day at the Stubble Field in Kincardine, but Jim was certainly on it that day, and he was the class of the field in the over 40s and 50s class, and it gives you an idea just how quick these Maicos were back in the 1980s. These were certainly not the kind of conditions that every motocross racer likes to race on, but for some strange reason Jim absolutely loved these kind of conditions. He always told me that the wetter it was, the better it was for him on the bike, and as you can see, absolutely flying on the 490 Maico. And I think by the time he crossed the finish line to take the win, he was more than half a lap in front of the rest of the pack. As I said, some riders absolutely love these kind of conditions, but personally speaking, I absolutely hated this kind of wet, sticky mud. In fact, it was taking me all of my time to get the bike round the track when it was dry, never mind when it was absolutely horrendous like it is here at Kincardine. But they say this is the way to ride a motocross bike in these conditions. Keep that throttle pinned and keep that back wheel spinning to keep it clean. But Jim's certainly got the knack on his 490 Twinshocker. And as I said in the video, Jim's tried various other different types of twin shock race bikes down the years, 2 strokes and 4 strokes, but he always seems to revert back to these big bore 490 Maicos, because he just seems to like the way they handle, and that power just seems to suit them down to the ground. And you can see how quick he's going even in these horrendously wet conditions. In fact, I remember it was It's so wet at this meeting that all of the transporters and vans, etc., all had to be pulled into the field in order that we could get the race event underway. But that just gives you an idea how wet this stubble field was in 2010. But I hope you've enjoyed this quick look around Jim Colligan's 1981 490 Mega 2, and when you see this bike going in these muddy conditions, you can just imagine how quick these machines are when they get the grip when the track conditions are dry. But Jim chalked up another win in this race as he crosses the line to take that checkered flag. So once again, thanks for watching CDB TV, and our next featured bike will also be a lovely Maico from 1971, and we'll be taking a look at this 360 bike when we return next to CDB TV.